This is a Christian show, right? Where we can learn more about the Word of God. So why do we spend so much time analyzing the headlines and looking at politics? Well, those are good questions, friends, and ones with real answers. The spiritual world plays itself out on the macropolitical level, so that's where we can see the movements of God most clearly. Today, we look again to Daniel 11 to understand the role of politics while we anticipate Christ's return. Welcome to the show. Hello, friends. Welcome back. Happy Thursday if you're watching this as it's broadcast in real time. We are going to continue our discussion about the return of Jesus Christ. We've talked about the signs of his coming, what the Bible says it will be like at his coming. We've talked about salvation to make sure we're on the right side of things when he comes. And today we're going to look at one of the biggest issues in the world today that the devil loves to use. We're going to see it just not only in current events, but we'll see it prophetically as well. It's a big show today, so let's buckle up and get going. And quickly, I'll just remind you, please go to locals.com and find our community there and join it. And please become a supporter there. That will give you access to the extended content that is not available on the other platforms like YouTube or Facebook. All right, let's get to it. We are starting with The Blaze today. This is an article from theblaze.com. And the headline is about a state representative in Oklahoma who says diversity, equity, and inclusion, shortened to DEI, is God. Yikes. All right. And then the headline also indicates this person's political affiliation, which is not the point of this show. So I'll let you just read that on your own. All right. She made these comments in response to a proposed piece of legislation there in Oklahoma, and here is what the article says about that. The bill under consideration would, quote, support parental rights to access, review, and comment upon curriculum, instructional materials, textbooks, and literary materials used or being used by the school district where their child attends school, and which their child might be exposed to without prior parental knowledge or consent, unquote. And this is in response, obviously, to the phenomenon that many parents ran into during the global health crisis, where suddenly they were, through the magic of Zoom, they were now participating in their child's classroom, and they were really unhappy with some of the stuff that they were hearing being taught there. And we've seen legislation similar to this crop up in various states around the country. Well, this state representative, according to the article here, pushed back on the legislation, calling it a very controversial bill that would burden educators with government overreach. And then she says, long story short, it's a very controversial issue, it's a very controversial bill, and there's nothing simple about it. I disagree. It seems very simple to me. Don't groom my kid sexually or teach him wrong things. Okay. Anyway, she continues. And when we start having government overreach, which I often hear folks talk about here, this is a prime example of government overreach. And I would hope that we would allow our teachers and our folks that are really trying to do the work of educating, leave them be. Education is not the same as grooming, in my humble opinion, but that's just me. This person argued that teachers should not have to, quote, share every waking moment of what they do and how they do it because it is, quote, not productive. Well, I mean, I think it's incredibly productive for you to be accountable to what I think about your curriculum. Like, you have the privilege of educating my child. You, of course, should be subject to my oversight. But again, that's just me. Anyway. And then the state representative compared these DEI initiatives to God and called for silencing those against the agenda. She says, that's very disturbing, to say the least, when we have, again, a state superintendent who does not want to have anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, she said. DEI is a deity. And I wasn't sure if that was like a play on words. DEI kind of sounds like deity, so maybe that was intentional, I'm not sure. DEI is a deity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is God. And then, of course, she gets like in a lot of trouble for that. The internet at large did not like that comment, and so she was facing some heat. But the point of this article is to show us how rampant idolatry really is in our society right now. She quite literally says this idea that's not even a tangible thing is God. And of course, because God himself is not tangible unless you go to the person of Jesus, who was quite tangible, but the world doesn't like that. Even when they talk about God, they don't usually use the word Jesus. He's too specific, and most people like to just take their own ideas and launch them onto the idea of God. In any case, the 10 Commandments, you remember those? They're in Exodus chapter 20. They're repeated, not exactly word for word, but idea for idea, repeated in Deuteronomy chapter 5. The very first one, which Jesus himself summarizes as, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul." That very first commandment says, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me." And the first commandment there, I mean, the prelude of it is God introducing himself and why they should care about him. And then the commandment itself is, don't have any other gods. Have no gods before me. I'm it. And we can understand that literally, like, do not worship Baal and God at the same time. Do not worship Molech and God at the same time. Do not worship Diana for a New Testament God, right? Do not worship any god and the God of the Bible at the same time, because that's against the rules. But we can understand it more kind of broadly too, because we can turn anything into a god, which is what this state representative did. She has turned an idea set into God. And God says, no, don't do that either. Have nothing before me. I'm the real God. Your ideas are not. Okay? And so this has been on God's heart since the days of the book of Exodus. So it's like 3,500 years now that God has been saying, this is the single most important thing that you need to remember as human beings. I am God. Put nothing else in my place. Whew. When we go to the book of 2 Thessalonians in the New Testament, chapter 2, we read about someone called the son of perdition, or the man of sin. And broadly, this son of perdition is equivalent to the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. So if you really want to learn about that, you can go backwards in time to our episode called God's Rottweiler and learn all about that. Maybe we'll even have some sort of extended content in the locals community about that as well. But broadly, this man of sin, the problem that this man of sin brings into the theological realm here is in verse 4, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. This man of sin opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Wow. And so it's we see that. That's the same problem that we're running into here on theblaze.com from Oklahoma. She's saying something other than God is God. And that's the entire essence of the man of sin, the son of perdition. And we understand that this son of perdition will be destroyed by the brightness of the coming of Jesus. And so you don't want to be found living according to the ideas of the man of sin on that great day, because those ideas will burn up at the brightness of Christ's coming. We see the same idea in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. The mark of the beast is predicated on this idea that something that's not God is walking around claiming to be God. In Revelation 13, verse 18, that's where we see that number. His number is 666. And although there are a number of ways to understand that number, and again, go to God's Rottweiler if you want want some of those ways. Broadly, we can understand that 666 is just falling short of 777. And so that would be like the perfect divine number. 7 is the number of completion. 3 is representative of God. It's a number of the Trinity, for example, but 3 and 7 are both divine numbers of wholeness. And so when you have 3 sevens, it's like the ultimate representation of God in his power. 6, by contrast, is the number of man. Actually said it right there in Revelation 13, but we can get that from Genesis 1 as well. Mankind was made on the 6th day of creation. The ancient Babylon was all about the number 6, which is the elevation. Babylon was about the elevation of mankind's ideas into the divine realm. Nebuchadnezzar himself, the king, thought that he was God on earth until the real God showed him otherwise. Babylon was centered on the number 6. Babylon gave us the way we tell time. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, because the Babylonians divided up human time into multiples of 6. They loved the number 6. So 6 is all about man, and if we have 666, that's mankind trying to be 777, trying to be God, but failing. And so over and over, from the Blaze, from the Commandments, from Thessalonians, from Revelation, we're seeing over and over again that this like crucial problem of humanity is that we want to be God. And we want to not just be God ourselves, we want to worship everything that we love as if that thing were God. And God hates that. He just loathes it. He gave us not just that first commandment, have no other gods before me, but the second commandment specifically says, do not worship anything on the earth. Right? So 2 out of the 10 commandments are dedicated against idolatry. Daniel 11, in the couple minutes we have left. This is obviously not a long exposition of Daniel 11, but Daniel 11 is important for right now because there are these 2 characters that war with one another throughout the entire chapter, the kings of the south and the kings of the north. The kings of the north and south, okay? And they fight and they fight and they fight. The king of the north in particular, throughout the chapter, gets it into his head that he is God. And so, for example, in verse 28, when returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant. So he like gets it in his mind that God and the ideas of God are an enemy. Verse 32, those who do wickedly against the covenant, so the unrighteous, he, the king of the north, will corrupt with flattery. But the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. And so he's like fighting against the people of God, and it looks like they're going to win, but God promises that his own people will be strong in the face of that anyway. So we see this, that the king of the north is inherently opposed to God. The king of the south is not much better because the king of the north, he appears like he is clearly opposed to God, but he appears as an entity that is in favor of God. So it's like the Revelation 13 problem, where that beast will say, Jesus, 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 but actually is operating from a position of the devil. And so the king of the south comes along and looks at this false religion and says, nope, don't like that either. And fights against him with, ultimately, the deeper we study into this, we realize he's fighting with secular ideas. So the end of Daniel 11 is less so about the individual like people or entities that are fighting, and it's much more about the ideas that are fighting. And both of the ideas from the north and the south are earthly ideas trying to be God. So the king of the north is this kind of like paganism masquerading as Christianity. That's all I'm going to say in the little time we have left here on that issue. But it's ideas of the earth that are masquerading as the things of God, or like Jesus says in Matthew chapter, have mercy, 10? I don't know, 7? Where he scolds the Pharisees for teaching as commandments the doctrines of men. And so it's Mark. That's in a number of them, but I think it's Mark chapter 7. Teaching as commandments the doctrines of men. And so that is, there we go. Yes, Mark 7:7. So that's the kind of false religion elevating earthly things to the realm of God. But then here comes the secular and says, no, there is no God. These ideas of humanism or collectivism or reason, these are the actual God. And so we are replacing like earthly ideas of God with earthly ideas as God. But both sides of this are not actually God. Both sides of this are simply elevating their own ideas into a divine realm. And Daniel 11 ends with Christ coming to destroy them all. So all of that is to say, why do we look to politics so much on this show? It's because politics is an excellent barometer of what God is doing. But that's where we have to stop. If we ever make the mistake of allowing politics and political ideas to cross into the divine realm where suddenly we are worshiping the Democrats or worshiping the Republicans, we're worshiping Donald Trump, or we're worshiping Robert Mueller, or Anthony Fauci or Joe Biden or whatever, any one of these figures, we've done something wrong. We're crossing over into the 666 mark of the beast, anti-First Commandment territory there. Let's never do that, friends. I know I need to stop. So I'm going to be praying for you between now and tomorrow that none of us will fall into this trap. And we're going to close our week tomorrow with a powerful appeal and a powerful episode. So make sure that you are subscribed so you can join us. Locals. Go become a supporter there. Facebook, like our page here, and change your notifications. Talking Donkey International YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and hit your notification bell. TalkingDonkeyInternational.org. Go to the podcast page and bookmark it. And don't forget, little old Rumble. Is just one button there. Hit the follow button on our channel there. God bless you all. Please come back tomorrow, and I will see you then for the final show of the first season of Something's Happening Here. May God bless.